If I asked you, most of us would say, of course I love nature, who would not? But often that's not enough. Hello and welcome, I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you're watching Eco India. To merely love nature is not enough because many aspects of it all around us are under threat. And if we love nature truly, we must protect it. And the key to doing this is traditional knowledge. Most of my plant lover friends struggle with growing the plants that they want, especially in the city soil. First of all, because they don't really know much about plants or farming, and secondly, because the internet ends up giving them some generic advice. But if an experienced farmer were to help them with their gardens, wouldn't it make a lot of difference? Sure it would, but where in these big cities can one find somebody with such a specific skill set and knowledge? Well, there's a Bangalore-based startup that is trying to bring together the traditional knowledge and skills of farming with urban gardening.
Ramesh has lived and worked as a gardener in Bengaluru for 10 years, but he's originally from a village 30 kilometers away where he and the generations before him were farmers on their own land.
What happened was our borewell went dry and we became dependent on rain to grow our crops. The rest of my family still lives on the farm, but I moved here to earn a better living.
A friend introduced him to a social enterprise called Urban Mali, which means urban gardener. It aims to bridge the gap between out-of-work farmers and a need in cities for people with intimate knowledge of nature. One of his regular clients live in a leafy residential area in the north of Bengaluru.
My profession as an HR takes a lot from me, working long hours, etc. And I couldn't tend to the small garden that I had. But I wanted somebody to take care of it, to make sure that it was fine and that they were growing healthy, and anytime I wanted to, I could go and get my fresh produce from the garden.
And Ramesh cares for the plants in her garden as if they were his own.
My plants feel like they're alive, healthy and kicking, and it's a fantastic feeling, right? I think I can safely say that I've never seen a dead plant, I've never seen a sick plant, and it's always fresh, it's always good, and they're always healthy.
Urban Mali keeps its health and environmental impact minimal. For example, they only use natural ingredients in their fertilizers.
In our city gardens, we don't use chemicals. We use liquid organic fertilizer we call Jeevamrit and Panchagavya. The chemicals that we used to use on the farm were dangerous. I would get blisters on my skin and they even caused asthma. In our gardens, we basically use Jeevamrit for everything: vegetables, fruits and flowers.
Urban Mali's gardeners have helped set up and maintain around 1,000 gardens around Bengaluru. It's not been entirely smooth. Often they've had to challenge perceptions about what a garden should look like. Residents tend to prioritize aesthetics over health and the environment, flashy exotic flora over native species. Urban Mali's founder is spearheading a drive to popularize native gardens.
If you look at our grandmother's time and the gardens that they used, they were all native desi varieties of plants. They were plants that are used for a cough and cold or a fever or something that makes a delicious stir fry. But these are plants that are used to the climate or the environment that they grow in. If you didn't water these plants for 3 days, they'd still know how to grow well and survive. Some of the native plants that can easily be grown in your garden are, of course, tulsi, everybody's favorite and such an auspicious plant. Ajwain is another plant, very good for coughs and colds again. In the flowering plants, hibiscus is one of our native varieties.
But things have changed. In 2018, a survey of more than 1,000 trees was conducted along a gradient from Bengaluru city centre to its northern fringes. It found that over half of the 93 species growing there are exotic.
Many of the plants that were brought in for horticultural purposes have also turned out to be invasive plants. Invasive plants are plants that grow so well and spread so much in this new environment that they start eating out all the native flora. That's a problem because this native flora attracts the butterflies, the birds, the bees that are native to this habitat that these invasive plants are growing in.
The Foundation for the Revitalization of Local Health Traditions is an organization that aims to revive the use of native medicinal plants. Vandana visits its nursery often to select varieties for her customers. She can learn a lot from botanist Ganesh Babu, who has been working here for 20 years.
This is very unique on the Mother Earth, which bleeds blue. We can call it as a wild banyan tree.
Wow.
This is actually called wild ginger. Okay, when we go to forest, sometimes in evergreen forest itself we will not get water. So we will be looking for these cones. So what we will do, see, we drink. This is actually, it will give a ginger smell.
Babu calls this a functional garden, a place where people can learn about how aesthetics and ecology can work together. Vandana takes the concepts back to urban Mali and all the gardens they tend to.
In gardening work, we are like doctors and the work comes easy to me. The work hours are good and I really like my work. In the city, I have worked in factories and companies. I feel I wasted so many years and earned so little. Now I work hard, I am able to support my family.
ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೀ ಸಂಬಳನೂ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಆಗೋದು ಮನೆಗೂ ಮೇಂಟೈನ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗ್ತಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇವಾಗ ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ದುಡಿತಾನೆ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ.
Finding jobs for farmers affected by a changing climate is a just way forward and a win-win for rural migrants as well as urban communities.
Planting a wall of trees seems like a rather ambitious idea, but the Great Green Wall initiatives in Africa and China have been trying to create a mosaic of greenery to combat desertification. Can India do the same to stop the advance of the Thar Desert, which is often the source of persistent sand and dust storms and scorchingly hot winds?
Videos like these are popping up all over social media. They show colossal dust storms raging through Delhi and the surrounding states. But this isn't a freak weather event. These storms are becoming seasonal. The dust comes from the Thar Desert. Like the Sahara and the Gobi, it's expanding and destroying vital living space. Africa and China have responded with ambitious planting projects, great green walls of trees to try and stop desertification. And India? India's lucky. The north has a natural green barrier, the Aravalli mountain range, which has held back the Thar Desert for centuries. That is, until now. The mega dust storms and hot winds blowing in from the desert are threatening the lives of millions in the national capital region. In 2019, India made a promising announcement. It would be planting its own Great Green Wall in the Aravallis to help fight desertification. But as we're about to see, walls of trees have shown mixed results in other parts of the world, and the Aravalli mountain range is facing some serious threats of its own. So what can India do better? And will it be able to slow the advancing desert? The powerful dust storms have led to a spike in bronchitis, breathing difficulties, and lung disease. They also destroy soil and damage crops. But this is not just the fault of climate change. Direct human actions such as illegal mining, deforestation, and urban sprawl are eating away at the mountain barrier and turbocharging desertification in the wider region.
The mining is happening to such a big extent that hill after hill is being razed to the ground. There are millions and millions of people living here. Without the Aravallis, the desert is going to completely engulf entire northwest India.
But North India's construction boom demands building materials, and lots of them. India's Supreme Court banned mining in the Aravallis in 2002, 2009 and 2018. But the destruction of this ancient mountain range continues at an alarming rate. A 2018 government study estimates that at least 20% of the Aravalli Hills in Rajasthan have already been lost to mining. Important groundwater systems have been disrupted, and many rivers have disappeared altogether. The Aravalli's ancient forests are also in trouble. Scientists calculated that since 1975, over 1,000 square kilometres of trees have been cut down and replaced with housing and farmland. And taking into account illegal deforestation, almost 6,000 square kilometres of tree cover has been lost. That's the equivalent of more than 380,000 cricket pitches. In 2019, after a season of especially punishing dust storms, the government proposed a solution. India's Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change would create a Great Green Wall, 1,400 kilometres long and 5 kilometres wide, to restore 1.5 million hectares of degraded land in the Aravalli region and stop the expansion of the Thar Desert. The wall would run through the states of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana and Delhi. But what does building a Great Green Wall actually mean? The concept was made famous by the African Union in 2007 as a way to collectively regreen the Sahel Desert region and create livelihoods for the people living there. The original tree wall project started off stretching from Senegal in the west to Djibouti in the east, passing through 13 different countries.
But of course, the progress across the continent has been sparsely distributed. Some countries have done much more than other countries. And it's not just the idea of planting trees, because, you could go out and plant trees. But what's really important is sustainability. How do you ensure that these things grow to maturity? So we have to be creative about the type of trees that are planted, and make sure that there's some sort of irrigation.
Watering the trees proved a tough challenge, but important lessons were learned too. Results suggest that the most successful regreening on the continent has actually been achieved by farmers, planting trees alongside their crops in countries like Niger and Malawi.
One of the things that I would advise any country embarking on this type of project to ensure that the people, the communities are part of this right from the get-go, and they participate and have a clear understanding of what the benefit of this project will be to them, because this is going to be the incentive for them to really work towards the success of the project as well.
Africa's Great Green Wall is aiming to restore 100 million hectares of degraded land by 2030. But so far, well under half of the restoration target has been achieved. The UN estimates that the project still needs about $33 billion of investment to complete it. The question is, though, would that be money well spent?
Great green walls around the world, and particularly the ones in Sahelian West Africa, Algeria, and China that have recently been reviewed in depth, do not have a good track record at all. But if desertification, desiccation, drying, things like this are happening, they're happening primarily because of global climate change patterns. And the idea that trees are going to stop a desert advancing simply doesn't hold water.
China started planting its Great Green Wall, known as the 3 North Shelter Belt Project, 44 years ago. Since then, the government has spent billions on tree planting. The plan is to plant an area of forest corridor as big as France and Italy combined by 2050, so there's still a lot to do. But can China's large-scale planting power set it apart?
China is quite different from these other cases. And the primary difference is just the way China is governed and the way the Chinese government gets things done.
So can India's government get their Great Green Wall done? The initiative was officially launched in March 2023, but since then, no planting has yet been done. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change says it's still preparing a state-by-state plan and identifying vulnerable hotspots. No one from the ministry agreed to be interviewed. Local communities have responded to this government inaction by experimenting with their own replanting strategies.
We decided that we're going to plant only local species. We got an expert on hand. We reached out to experts who knew about what it means to take on an Aravalli forest.
IAM Gurgaon's first project transformed an old mining site into what is now the Aravalli Biodiversity Park. The team collected seeds from the Aravalli forest to recreate hundreds of native plant and tree species. The planting project also made use of indigenous water capture techniques to support the plants. They regenerated an old bund, that's an embankment and ditch structure used to channel water during the monsoon rains. And they also cleaned out several johads, small ponds that help to recharge groundwater.
We were very, very clear that no water from our projects will go out, and we will find ways of taking water from the road or wherever we can get extra water into our projects.
So can a Great Green Wall help to restore India's Aravalli Mountains? Well, probably not the way things are going.
If the government doesn't actually take steps to protect that natural wall from mining, from real estate development, from commercial activities, then these kind of schemes are not really, they're just going to be cosmetic.
With communities taking the lead on localised replanting, the responsibility is now on the Indian government to make good on its Great Green Wall promise. Enforcing legal protections in the Aravallis would be a good start.
Increasing extreme weather events like floods and droughts have made wheat synonymous with food security. The war in Ukraine also had its role to play in it. However, several regions of the world are currently facing a severe wheat grain shortage, which can well be attributed to climate change. For example, food losses can reach up to 84% in the case of a severe drought. But what happens if the wheat grain becomes resilient to all of these factors? The answer can be found in the climate chambers of a research facility in Munich.
Could this delicate little plant help fight food shortages? The wheat in this climate chamber is still only 7 centimeters high, but in just 10 weeks' time, this special variety will be ready for harvesting, up to 6 times a year.
It's growing well. It's already flowered, as you can see here. The green biomass dies, and what's left behind is the grain in the ears. We can provide long periods of daylight to boost growth. We don't have to set special times where it's cooler or warmer. We can cultivate the plant at a steady temperature of, say, 23 degrees, and daylight lasting 18, 20, or even 22 hours. And of course, that allows for a harvest with a high yield.
The team from the Chair of Digital Agriculture at the Technical University of Munich, which is also funding the project, control and test various key factors, such as light, temperature, nutrient supply, and most importantly, water. They mainly use a water-nutrient mixture so the water can be recycled, as well as a layer of water that doesn't evaporate. This means that water consumption is up to 95% lower than in agriculture. In recent years, water has proved to be the most unpredictable factor in agricultural production. In Germany, wheat production remains relatively steady. But around the world, it's in decline. Droughts and floods are taking a severe toll. The Bavarian town of Ansing looks as idyllic as ever. But farmer Bernhard Heimerer had to contend with several spells of heavy rain this summer. 1/3 of his harvest has been damaged. He can now only sell it as animal feed.
So this batch is the same variety as that batch, but there's no way it can be used for bread. Just when the wheat was ready for threshing, it rained torrentially. I decided not to thresh it while it was wet because of the drying costs. Instead, I decided to wait until it dried out. But it rained for 10 or 12 days. There was so much precipitation. And then part of the harvest was damaged, and there was practically no more quality wheat left. It was extreme this year. It went from one extreme, very rainy, to very dry, then rainy again. It was extreme this year, for sure.
Growing wheat indoors could be viable not only in regions affected by drought or flooding, but also in Germany to reduce the negative impact of agricultural production on the environment.
It has many advantages. The water requirement is extremely low. We have no negative impact on the environment, on biodiversity. We don't need crop protection. We can control nutrients in a very targeted way. But we do have a high energy input as well as the technical setup, which has a CO2 footprint. As things stand, it would be rash to present this to the world as a solution, but it's a building block, one element in the food production process.
There's already interest from countries like Singapore, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. For reasons ranging from lack of space to water shortages, wheat grown indoors is a promising option.
Over the years, I have covered several stories about farmers' produce being wasted. Often, it starts with the boom in the production of a certain crop, usually a fruit or a vegetable, which is followed by a drastic drop in the market demand, and then the farmers are just forced to either throw their produce on the streets or just let it rot. But why? Because they do not have access to affordable cold storages, and if their produce is not immediately sold, then it is good for nothing. But the knowledge of a group of scientists in Tamil Nadu can help save all of this produce.
We all know that fruit can rot within 1 or 2 days, but this white sachet could change that and solve a lot of food waste problems that come with it. And the problems are huge. According to a 2021 UN report, household food waste in India is estimated to amount to around 50 kilos per person per year, almost 70 million tonnes in total. Unconsumed food increases waste management problems and accounts for up to 10% of worldwide carbon emissions. Indian agri-biotech company GreenPod Labs says it can extend the lifespan of fruit and vegetables by simply adding sachets to the transport box, a solution inspired by nature.
When a fruit or vegetable is kept at room temperature, there's more than 3 times the chance of spoilage when compared to cold storage. That makes the latter preferable in one sense. But cold storage is an expensive infrastructure that includes high capital and operational cost. That's the disadvantage of cold storage. Now, all our products work well in temperatures from 10 degrees to 45 or 50 degrees. So, the sachet can actually replace cold storage.
These small sachets slow down the fruit's ripening process by harnessing natural plant extracts.
Generally, all plants and trees have their own defence mechanisms to fight infections. We adopt this strategy in our product. The volatile compounds induce the defence mechanism and help to prolong shelf life by 2 more days. So it's purely natural.
The company has embraced the UN's Sustainable Development Goal of drastically reducing food waste by 2030. A lot of damage happens during transport. The GreenPod Labs has done an experiment with freshly harvested grapes. This is what they looked like after 10 days at 32 degrees Celsius. Some are already bad. And this is a sample where the company's sachets were used.
When transporting fruit and vegetables, the sellers face economic loss on 2 levels. First, the spoilage. Say they carry 100 kilos, around 20 kilos are spoiled, and only 80 kilos can be sold. This is one type of wastage. Secondly, even the remaining 80 kilos deteriorate in quality and therefore lose value. So the seller would only get 80 or 90 rupees instead of 100. We solve both these problems with GreenPod. It reduces the overall percentage of fruit and vegetables spoiled from 20% to 1% or under. In the end, it brings financial benefit to our customers.
So how can you avoid wasting food as a consumer? By purchasing only as much food as you really need, for example. and sharing or distributing any food that you or your family can't eat among friends, co-workers and neighbours. Or by giving it to the needy, by donating leftover food to food banks.
Knowledge is the only key, be it traditional or scientific, that helps us adapt and survive in this ever-changing world. But you let me know, how did you like today's episode and what sort of stories would you like to see more of? You can email us or write to me directly on my social media handles. I will see you next week. Until then, take care, goodbye, namaskar.